Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and this is my weekly reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read next week based on my mood. Really good week. Not a lot of things that were actually completed, but interesting nonetheless. So let's just jump right into it and we'll talk about it. So the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to circle back from last week because at that point, I had finished Fraud by Anita Brookner, but Leo of A Little Book Life, who I have been buddy reading Anita Brookner's entire works with, had not. And so I wanted to circle back because I didn't really kind of tell you anything about my final thoughts on the book. So this book was so tricky because the setup was divine. I mean, like I literally was like, oh, look at what Anita's doing. I'm super excited and here for it. So the setup of this is that an older woman, a lonely, isolated older woman who is not married, is single, has no children, has no family, has gone missing. And so the cops don't know what to do with this because she doesn't really have any connections to the community, so to speak. So they start talking to people who knew her peripherally. It's like great setup, right? Very Elena Ferrante, if you've read the quartet, the Neapolitan quartet. So I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. Maybe she's going to look at loneliness from the outside in, as opposed to like so much of this woe is me internal dialogue about these older women and you know, how are they going to spend their days? How are they going to get through all the hours before they can finally go to sleep? You know, kind of thing. But no, it was a bait and switch. The fraud was on me because she did not really give us a mystery. She followed the same exact formulas that she's followed for others, but with much less success. There's only one interesting character in here, and it's not Anna who's missing. It's Mrs. Marsh. And that woman is really funny and interesting, but not enough to support an entire book like this. The idea is that Mrs. Marsh was friendly with her mother, with Anna's mother. And when she died, Mrs. Marsh felt like a little bit of an obligation to make sure that Anna was taken care of. But Mrs. Marsh really never got on with Anna, never really connected with her. And so it feels forced. And so she kind of avoids it, but then, is very interested in leveraging Anna's time and energy if she needs something. Again, another theme in Anita Brookner's works is how single women are leveraged to support other people, but never really seen for themselves. But at the same time, Anita never gives any of her characters any interesting things to do. Like they don't volunteer, they don't work. They just apparently will walk to a park or stare out the window or clean their house. So they don't even read. So it's very hard to be sympathetic, especially after reading the same woman over and over and over and over and over again. So the shtick is getting a little old. Leo and I, neither of us like this one. And I actually, for the first time in 12 novels, I skimmed. I skimmed some of this. Her writing is still exquisite for sure. But we both want her to do better, to be better, to move on, to let this go. I think there's still some really good books ahead of us, and we're looking forward to that. But I think I mentioned last week that we will not be reading in the same way that we usually read these, where we just savor 3 chapters at a time and then just like discuss all of the details. The juice is gone. This is more like a husk, so there's nothing to really suck out of the marrow of these. It's really what we're going to do now moving forward is just checking at the halfway point. And these are always super slim, so we could probably knock it out in a weekend. So, but we will continue because I do know that there's some gems still ahead that people like. This is not one of them. So stay away from this one if you have not yet read anything from her. So needed to tie that one off. Now let me show you a book that I wanted to read for Pride. I wanted to read a YA queer story and a queer coming of age. And when I saw this on Sean from Past Story Times channel, I thought, oh, that sounds fantastic. And guess what? It was. This is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. Oh, this was so good. So this is San Francisco in 1954, and we have our main character, Lily, who's in high school, and she lives in Chinatown. And Chinatown butts right up against North Beach. North Beach, which for book lovers is the home of the very famous, very beloved City Lights books. And North Beach is traditionally an Italian neighborhood. And so they're literally right butt up against each other, but very, very different experiences as you walk through them. And I can imagine being even more pronounced in the 1950s. I love how she was able to talk about the Chinese culture, especially first generation, like Lily is, and talk about the challenges that they have, but the love that they have for their neighborhood, but not necessarily feeling that for the country that their parents came from. And we have, Lily is just a great character. Her parents are really great characters. The neighborhoods come alive. She has a best friend that she's been friends with since they were very, very young, but they're starting to drift apart. And she recognizes that her friend is very demanding, and her friend doesn't always give her the same benefit of the doubt or opportunities as Lily gives her friend. Lily recognizes a kindred spirit in Kath, and Kath also loves science. Kath wants to be an airplane pilot. She is in love with airplanes, in love with flight. Well, Lily wants to be to work in space and science, and is amazed and actually has an aunt who works at a space laboratory as a scientist. And so she has she's struggling to begin with, just to make sure that as a woman, as a young girl, she has access to the sciences, and that she spends time there because her friends are always trying to pull her away because nobody really does that. And so she becomes friends with Kath, and in the interim, in meeting her and talking with her, they recognize that they both have heard about this club, and it's called the Telegraph Club. And Lily is interested in it because of a male impersonator that she saw in a newspaper, whereas Kath has actually been there. And so hence an adventure starts. So this is a coming of age, wonderful about San Francisco history and giving you a real sense of the neighborhoods, which, I love that. And then there's also some really good stuff about the Red Scare and how our American government treated Chinese Americans because of the fear of communism. And that's also brought in here. Really well interwoven. I think this was really well done, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in any of those things. And just such a good Pride read this month. Then I read something that just blew my mind. I was not expecting this. This is Josephine Tey's Miss Pym Disposes. So Josephine Tey, I've read another book of hers. I have read this one, which is The Daughter of Time. This is my Folio Society edition that I found. And this was a weird book where it's a mystery. So Josephine Tey was known as one of the grand dames of the golden age of mystery writing. And this book was just bizarre because she's has her main investigator laid up in the hospital, and he needs something to do, but he can't move anywhere because he was shot and he's in recovery. And so a friend of his basically gives him a puzzle. The puzzle is, did King Richard III kill his nephews to get to the crown? And so you're basically trying to solve a historical case from a bed in a hospital. And she introduces a young clerk in the archives to be able to kind of help him piece things together. But just really fun, wacky, smart, fun book. So I'd already read that. So I know she plays with form, but I didn't expect so much playfulness with form. So in this book, we have Miss Pym. Miss Pym is a writer, and she writes psychology books and is just very, very well respected. She's an older single woman, no child, no husband, no family to worry about. And her very good friend from her school days is now kind of the head of this women's college. And so she asks her to come and to do her a favor and speak to the girls in her school, the young ladies who are about to graduate, and come stay at the women's college and give a lecture. And so she says, sure, I'll come. And this also made me think of another book that I love about college and university life, women and mysteries, and that's Gaudy Nights by Dorothy L. Sayers. Gaudy Nights, one of my favorite mysteries, even though it's not really a mystery, it's a very layered mystery. So this had all those similar elements. So you have, an older person meeting the young girls, also meeting the other women in the academia who are teaching these young women at this college. And she is questioning her life. She's finding so much joy in being around all these young people. She's finding a lot of joy in kind of seeing them and recognizing them and kind of seeing the types of girls that they are and where they may go. And she's just enjoying herself tremendously, so much so she keeps staying. She keeps threatening to leave and then is convinced to stay for another few days. Because she's a psychologist, she's really looking and trying to understand what are the cliques, what are the girls like, all of this interesting things. And there's a lot of conversations and theme about superficiality versus interiority, which I thought was very interesting. What's most fascinating is the murder doesn't happen until the end of the book. Whoa. And so I'm reading it and I'm thinking, oh, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? Because I know that she writes mysteries, and I didn't think this was a cozy mystery per se. But I just have so much admiration for what she does. And this book there are a lot of characters, but they're very, very well drawn. They're very differentiated. The scene and the setting was wonderful. This was just really fun, good mystery book that breaks form. So if you like things like this might be a good one for you as well. Yeah, so that's all I read. Really, 2 books. Very unlike me, but I had a very busy week. So let's talk about what I'm currently reading. So I am still reading Proust. Now, if you're like me, you probably have heard of Proust, but don't really have an example of his writing to really know what's the big deal. I mean, yes, there's the famous story in Swann's Way of the Madeleine and how eating it triggers a sense memory, which kind of takes him back into his childhood. Yes, very important, very pivotal moment, great scene. But I thought I would read a little bit, and I don't usually do this, but these are the gems that keep me going. So in Search of Lost Time, in the series, we have the main narrator, and he's kind of whiny. He's very pretentious. He is very entitled. He's also sickly, and he's a lot. He's an emo dude, and a lot to deal with. And so it gets really annoying. But then there's passages like this that will just randomly pop up. And that's what keeps me going. So I thought I would read this. Please indulge me. And maybe this will be something that sparks interest for you too. So in the scene, we have our main narrator. He's been sent out of town because he's been bothering this woman and just kind of trying to have her notice him. He's very needy, I mentioned before. This is the Guermantes way, by the way. This is volume 3. So he's been sent out of town and he's meeting up with a friend of his who's in the army. And so he's staying in this town near the barracks, and he'll go and see his friend because his friend doesn't have a lot of time that he's allowed to leave. So he's traipsing through the town on his way to the barracks when this scene happens. But memories, griefs are unstable things. There are days when they become so remote that we are scarcely aware of them. We think they have disappeared. And so we give our attention to other things. And the streets of this town had not yet become for me what streets are in our usual whereabouts, merely a means of getting from one place to another. The life led by the inhabitants of this unfamiliar world must be something wondrous, it seemed to me. And often the lighted windows of a building would keep me standing for a long time in the dark, motionless, laying before my eyes the genuine and mysterious scenes of life I might not enter. Here the genie of fire showed me in a crimson tableau the booth of a chestnut seller where a pair of non-commissioned officers, their belts abandoned on chairs, were playing cards, without suspecting that they had been conjured out of the darkness by a magician, like a stage apparition, and presented as they actually were at the very moment to the eyes of a stopping passerby who was invisible to them. In a little junk shop, a half-spent candle projected its red glow onto an engraving and turned it to the color of blood, while the light cast by a big lamp, struggling with the darkness, bronzed a fragment of leather, nielled a dagger with glittered spangles, spread a sheen of precious gold like the patina of the past or the varnish of a master over pictures, which were only bad copies, and turned this whole hovel, in which there was nothing but cheap imitations and cast-off rubbish, into a marvelous Rembrandt painting. Occasionally, I looked toward some vast old apartment with its shutters still open, and where amphibious men and women, adapting themselves each evening to living in a different element from their daytime one, swam about slowly in the dense liquid, which at nightfall rises incessantly from the wells of lamps and fills the room to the brink of their walls of stone and glass. And as they moved about in it, their bodies sent forth unctuous golden ripples. That's why I read Proust. So I thought I would share that. Would love to hear your thoughts on that if that speaks to you like it does me. Okay, then I'm also reading with Bird of Past Story Time. We're doing our very first buddy read. I can't believe it's taken us this long, but we are reading Elizabeth Bowen's The Death of the Heart. My first Elizabeth Bowen, and I'm here to tell you people, my God, she is a writer. The atmosphere of this book is remarkable. This is a layered psychological study of this young woman. She is orphaned, and she is the half sister of this man who has kind of she's been foisted on her half brother, let's put it that way, and his wife. And there's just this indolence and ennui in the household. And it permeates. There's just, the house is almost oppressive in the boredom and just lacking of any kind of direction. But our main character, Portia, is a watcher, an observer, and she takes notes and she writes diaries. And the opening of this was just remarkable, with her sister-in-law, Anna, walking around with one of her friends, talking about how she found this diary. And she is a little taken aback that she's been so acutely observed. We are a third of the way through this, and it portends to be a phenomenal book. I hope it keeps up in the way that it is. It's giving us rich conversations. So thrilled to be starting this one. Also making more progress with The Women I Think About at Night. Still hate that title. Traveling the Paths of My Heroes by Mia Kankimäki. I think I'm saying that right. Translated by Douglas Robinson. So we've moved out of the Karen Blixen side of things, and now we're looking at women who were explorers. I'm hoping to get through that section this week and then moving on to the artists, because there's a lot of rich stuff that I just can't wait to get my hands into. But I think I mentioned before, I'm reading this slowly because I am savoring and just learning so much, and I'm loving it. So wonderful book here. Then I'm also reading Breasts and Eggs. And this is by Mieko Kawakami. And this is translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd. Wow, this book. Hate this. I'm repulsed and attracted to this cover. I hate it, and I kind of like it because it's so creepy, gross. But this is such an interesting book set in Japan, modern day, and we have three main characters, and each of them are dealing with bodies and their bodies and the concerns and the anxieties and implications of being a woman in a body. Ugh, it's a lot, but it's very well done. And we also have a lot of interesting dynamics about how they interact with each other at the different life phases that they're in. We have a woman, her sister, and her niece. About 30% through, and enjoying it's the wrong word. I'm impressed by it, I guess is a better way to say it. Then I saw Russell from Ink and Paper Blog talk about this book, and I remembered that I have it in my NetGalley and I need to prioritize it because I think it just came out maybe last week. And the book is Secrets of Happiness by Joan Silber. I had read her book, The Improvements, before and found it interesting. Was curious about it, but when I heard Russell say it was really good, that made me think, okay, I want to grab this. So I'll be reading that. I just started it, but not enough to really give any impressions as of yet. But that'll help me bust my NetGalley backlog. So yay there. So that's literally what's on tap. But if you saw my video from yesterday, you'll know that I'm now interested in epigraphs and introductions and all of these things based off of a Twitter thread that I saw. And so it made me wonder, what insight was I missing from books that I loved that I should go back and look at the introductions? So I pulled a few that I'm going to read this weekend. So I just finished this book. This is Voices in the Evening by Natalia Ginsburg. And the introduction was written by Colin Tobin. Just finished it, put it on the shelf, never returned to it. So I will be returning to this one. How did I not come back and read this one? I loved this book so deeply. The Street by Ann Petrie has an introduction by T.R.A. Jones. Why didn't I read that? Again, no idea. I never went back and read the introduction to Swan's Way, done by Lydia Davis, who did the translation, and she did a marvelous translation of or The Way by Swan, which is volume 1. So I'm going to go back and read this as well. And then the funniest one, the absolute funniest one of my most favorite books ever. I've never read the introduction, which was done by Ali Smith. This is The Door by Magda Szabo. Right? I'm laughing, and hopefully you're laughing along with me. So I have a little bit of introductory reading to do here. But I'm looking forward to that very much. I'm going to do that this weekend. So that was a lot, even though I didn't finish a lot. I still had a lot to talk about when it comes to the books that are in my purview right now. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, we are still in a global pandemic. I'm really looking forward to not having to say this anymore, but we're not there yet. So until we are, please maintain safe social distance, wear a mask if you're not vaccinated, and to protect people who are immunocompromised or not vaccinated. Wash your hands frequently and do not touch your face. That's it for me for now. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. Bye.